all the others, of course, who are so involved. I wish I could call all of your names, but you know who you are. And so we have made even a bolder step that even though we are a small country within the Caribbean, that we determined that we needed a pavilion here at COP so that we can spread the word that irrespective of what is happening, even a small nation like St. Kitts and Nevis is bold enough to say, we can do it. That is what we bring to COP this year. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. So from his presentation, you know energy is one of the ways in which we have to pursue. Now, we would hear now from Senior Minister, the Right Honorable Dr. Denzel Douglas, and I'll give a little background to that. Last year, he joined us in Egypt and became very excited about the role that foreign affairs can play in helping us to shape the sustainable island state. So let us hear what perspective he has to offer us. Minister Douglas.
Thank you, moderator, Madam Chair, Ratton, who is with us here at the St. Kitts and Nevis COP28 Pavilion, as we lend our own explanation and we support the rest of the world in making a difference in climate change, and thus preparing our people of St. Kitts and Nevis for what that means to us and where we will be with that in mind in the future. So I understand that I'm going to be making a few remarks as one of the contributors in this national ministerial side event. And it will deal specifically with financing the sustainable island state agenda that we are pursuing. So I want to thank you for being here, and of course recognizing our Prime Minister and fellow panelists. I just want to emphasize again how pleased I am to be here on this critical conversation on how we will eventually finance as a people and as a country, and how we are going to realize our sustainable island state agenda through relevant, impactful investments. As we set out from St. Kitts and Nevis in the Eastern Caribbean of the Caribbean community countries, as we set out on this path of becoming the first model sustainable island state anywhere in the world, by setting our collective energies as a government and as our people onward toward the ambitious vision that has been so aptly set out by our Prime Minister time and time again in his public and private statements at home, and of course here as well at COP28 in the UAE. And as the Minister, I am very much committed, not only as the Minister of Foreign Affairs, but also as the Minister of International Trade, as the Minister of Economic Development and Investment, to ensure that we position St. Kitts and Nevis, utilizing the creativities and the human resources of these three ministries so that we can be part of finding the solutions to our issues. Specifically, we intend to use investment pathways, I should say, and partners in achieving this particular goal. We are aware that the agenda will acquire and must, in the process, require huge investments that we calculate will be well over some $25 billion. I emphasize that, 25 billion US dollars over the short, medium, and long term. And we envisage and envision that this investment will come through a number of sources. Firstly, we anticipate that there will be public investments, of course, coming from the public sector. There will be private sector investments as well. And this, we envisage, will be coming from local sources, especially second investments from our own economic citizens. For those of you who do not know, in this part of the world in particular, we have significant numbers of economic citizens who are waiting to make a second investment in moving this country forward. So we will depend naturally on the second investments of our economic citizens who are here in this region and around the world. We also, of course, will expect investments coming from regional sources and, of course, from international sources. We will expect as well that there will be a consolidation of the traditional relationships and pursuing new geostrategic partnerships as we move on this path. In fact, this specifically will target the Global South participation in the Middle East, in Africa, and of course also in Latin America within our own hemisphere. We will again leverage our relationship, international partners like Taiwan, Venezuela, and Cuba for specific reasons and in that specific order. And we also, of course, will use our own regional and international funding agencies with which we are already associated. Of course, all this will engage and involve economic diversification. We understand that economic diversification does in fact spur growth and build as well resilience, which is really akin to creating a very progressive environment in which all businesses, all communities, all families can in fact prosper. Therefore, as part of our own Sustainable Island State agenda, we have developed strategic priorities of the green diversification of some of the key sectors, such as the tourism sector, the agricultural sector, the manufacturing sector. And we shall also capitalize on the emerging areas such as the digital industry, the blue and orange economies, which already we are tapping into. With regard to the tourism and agricultural sector, we hope to create a circular economy approach by mitigating waste, minimizing carbon dioxide emissions in the tourism sector, and greening in particular the agriculture sector by using hydroponics, using greenhouses, and possibly vertical farming technology systems while pursuing these new areas. While in the emerging sectors, we hope to bridge what has become the digital divide to ensure that we can spur economic diversification and capitalize on our own blue economy. The goal is to encourage job creation through entrepreneurship while decarbonizing existing sectors and developing the necessary skills that are needed to take advantage of emerging opportunities. of course, there must be policy development. And in pursuance of the transition to the Sustainable Island State agenda, government has largely set in place several policy measures, in addition to the National Development Planning Framework. And some of these policies include the following. One, enhanced duty concessions on all renewable energy, reforming on all renewable energy items that will be part of the reformation that we would expect. Also, there will be legislative agenda, which we have already been working on, in reforming all our tariffs in order to facilitate the input of photovoltaic systems in households and also in the national grid. There will be a national energy policy that will in fact receive support from our citizens and others with an interest. There will be an urban development plan to incorporate this new agenda in going forward. The National Physical Development Plan also will invigorate and speak to this new agenda that we refer to. And there will be, of course, the National Environmental Protection Act reforms that will be laid in our Parliament. And finally, the Fishing Act and the necessary regulations for our Fishing Act will ensure part of our solution to food security. In concluding, I want to emphasize that this is but a snapshot of what will be the critical priority areas where we hope that we can secure a win-win partnerships with all who are engaged. Our pitch today and for the future from here onwards will be simply that our ambitions, they are attainable. The new industries that we speak about will emerge. The new technologies and the new energy that we will harness will in fact be expressed. Our size, I emphasize, gives us an opportunity. We will therefore maneuver nimbly, tactfully, and in fact strategically as we fully focus our attention on the resilient development that is going to be necessary. God bless us, and I hope you continue to pray for us as we seek to achieve this goal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Douglas, for that other perspective. And if you think about the two perspectives together, this is quite a humongous task. And I will quickly now ask Dr. Gardner to set the scene, because he has listened keenly to our honorable gentleman, and he would set the scene because what former Prime Minister said, nimbly, we have to go nimbly. I like that. So we are going to invite Dr. Gardner because he has the technical expertise, and he would set the scene for us to think about some of these achievements that we would like to pursue. Dr. Gardner.
Thank you very much, Ms. Rattan, Honorable Prime Minister, Ministers, ladies and gentlemen all. The intent this morning is to quickly talk about some of the nuances that must be considered, and I was hoping to have a PowerPoint presentation to press which one?
You can have a seat on this.
to quickly walk through. I am given 3 minutes, and so I have exactly 3 slides. So I will help to set the scene. So there was a time when we used to watch the news, certainly versus my age and beyond, when we used to hear about and read about smog. We used to read about and hear about smog in certain countries, and we used to say, oh, those poor people in Asia who are suffering from these polluted mega cities. We did not, at that time, recognize the interconnectedness of the global space where pollutants were concerned. Climate change was at that time not yet a major issue, and most of the focus was on local pollutants. But in 2001, through the third assessment report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, there was, for the first time, confirmation of an 85-year-old theoretical prediction and a 65-year-old empirical measurement that climate change was indeed something that was happening due to the burning of fossil fuel in the industrialized era. And in 2007, the fourth assessment report of the IPCC again then confirmed unequivocally that climate change was anthropogenic, it said, man-made, caused by man, because there were debates about whether it was cyclical or induced by man. More critically, in 2013, the fifth assessment report of the IPCC fingered small island development states as those who were at the greatest risk to suffer from the potential impacts, or the projected impacts, I should say, of climate change. And by 2022, the sixth assessment report stated that the world was 50% certain to exceed 1.5 degrees Celsius. Now, 1.5 degrees Celsius rise in temperature since pre-industrial era is significant, because that's what have been identified by climate scientists as the requirement for the impacts on SIDS to not be exacerbated. So I start by pointing out that every single thing that we do is going to be linked to the start point, which is the issue of the anthropogenic climate change. That is where everything starts. Because without us understanding and recognizing that climate change is a clear and present and definite existential threat, and our systems must be adapted to deal with those threats, then everything else that we do will go to naught. So the principle is, how do we adapt our human and natural systems, our food and water requirements, those things that we need for basic survival, our energy systems, our ecosystems, and our built environment to those projected impacts. And in adapting those systems, the question then becomes, more importantly, how do we ensure that those systems can, A, contribute to a resilient socioeconomic development pathway? Because it's that resilient socioeconomic pathway that is going to be contributing the money and the resources that we require for the adaptation in the first place. So it becomes a vicious cycle where if we don't adapt effectively so that we can sustainably grow and then reinvest that growth in adaptation, then we are bound to perish. So, you know, the good thing about it is that while we do that, we are able to contribute to the mitigation efforts, the climate abatement efforts. So no one can accuse us of not wanting to play our part, recognizing that together CARICOM countries contribute less than 0.2% of global CO2 emissions. We recognize that in building a resilient system, we are likely to be able to play our own part in climate abatement. So the principle is that, as the Prime Minister said, the Honorable Prime Minister said, the energy security, how we utilize energy from indigenous sources, clean indigenous sources that are cost effective, is central to all that we propose in respect to our sustainable island state strategy. How do we then ensure that that provides reliable access, secure access to our citizens and our businesses, so that businesses can compete from cost-effective energy availability that is reliable, and that citizens can prosper and do those things that they require through access to affordable energy is important. And the availability of energy, of course, is key. People from Skellig and Nevis are here, and they will tell you that if there's a flicker in the lights, they start getting calls. Because all that we do as humans in this era is dependent on energy, whether it is social or economic or otherwise. Of course, the good thing about it is that the linkages with food and the water security are critical. Energy is not an end in itself, but a means to an end. And recognizes how we use energy to build our food security and our water security is always going to be the critical piece of building first what we would call an internally sustainable island state. As we say in Jamaica, you dance a yard before you dance abroad, right? So you build internally what is sustainable and secure, and then you would be able to be in a position to utilize that sustainability that you have built internally to support the rest of the globe in their decarbonization efforts. So the expectation is that with geothermal energy, with solar energy, with offshore wind, some amount of onshore wind, as a minimum, possibly waste to energy eventually, the state of Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis will be in a position to not just supply itself, as the Prime Minister said, but also supply the globe in its decarbonization efforts. The expectation is that the world is moving towards an electrification process as its decarbonization is being pursued. And the only way to do that is to ensure that renewable energy that is cost effective is brought online in ways that can power transport, power industries. A lot of the heating and cooling is going to be produced from electricity, things that were being originally produced from fossil-based fuels for heating are now going to be electrified because of the ease at which renewables can be integrated into the electricity system. Transports, we have seen it with, is the easiest way to decarbonize significant portions of transport is to electrify it. And there is a principle which we call electrify everything. Minister Minan was in Jamaica where we talked about electrifying everything. And then, even those hard to electrify sectors can be electrified by what we call power to X, where we replace fossil fuels and petrochemicals with what we call electrofuels and electrochemicals, hydrogen and hydrogen-based chemicals that are made from green electricity sources that are able to produce methanol that can be used in shipping and some industries, ammonia that can be used not just for energy, but also for chemicals that can be used in the chemical industry and so on and so forth. And in that principle, we expect that St. Kitts and Nevis will not contribute to its own decarbonization, but to the decarbonization of the entire world. And this is the last slide. It seems complex because it is, but that is why partnerships are important. And we have the kinds of partnerships that will ensure that the dynamisms of the system are such that the building of a resilient energy system, the building of a resilient water system, the building of a resilient food system will contribute to resilient sectors, and resilient sectors will contribute to resilient economies and resilient states, and create the principle of a sustainable island state for St. Kitts and Nevis. Ladies and gentlemen, the role of the CCRI is to ensure that we help St. Kitts to accelerate what it probably would have done anyway, but would not have done as quickly as if we were involved. So thank you very much.
I quickly thank Dr. Gardner. Honorable gentlemen, you could take your seats again.
Okay, thank you.
And complex is one word that resonates we've heard much, and I'm anxious to get to the discussion. Dr. Campbell, you notice he would not have said anything. He is not ready as yet. He is listening keenly. He is keenly listening so that when we sum up, he can give us some good advice on how far we go. So I'm now going to just have a bit of conversation with all panelists. And my first question is to the Prime Minister. And we have all presented our views. But just outline to me two major challenges that St. Kitts Nevis faces in terms of getting to achieve that goal of sustainable island state, and how do we address them?
Right, thank you very much. There are many challenges, of course, but one of them would be the financing of the transformation. That is a challenge. Not an insurmountable challenge, but is a challenge. For example, as was mentioned by Professor, in making sure that we transition and we get that energy, how do we get it? For example, to get the solar energy, that had to be an 80+ million US dollar investment, which of course SICRI was part of the process, 5Cs was part of the process, and we had others involved apart from our local persons. We were able to secure that. But of course that only would supply about 30% of what we need. So we need more. And that is why we are saying that financing has to be very much on the front line of resolving this matter. And that is why the Minister of Economic Development put forward how we intend to solve this issue. Now, that is one, the financing aspect, and how we are going to deal with it from the number of perspectives that were mentioned. One, public investment. Two, public-private investments. And three, partnership with philanthropic organizations, with other countries, and with others who, of course, would have an interest in seeing St. Kitts and Nevis transform. So it means, therefore, that the challenge is, how are we going to make sure that all who are needed at the table, that they are at the table? And therefore, that challenge is being dealt with, and I'm proud to say that we have come a significant way. However, there is more ways to go. One of the challenges is geothermal. CDB with us, we have put up 17 million US dollars. We have passed a resolution in Parliament, a historic resolution. We have a $20 million gap, $20 million US dollar gap. How are we going to fill that gap? So the challenge is to get persons to the table who may not be able to see a profit right away, but would help us to establish our geothermal production so that that can help to transform us and also become economic viable and attract others to the table in terms of investment. And that would open up industries and possibilities. So economic investments, financing, that's a challenge. However, we are dealing with it. The other matter that we have to deal with, which is a bit more subtle, but from my own perspective, this message has to reach every man, woman, and child in St. Kitts and Nevis. Our people have to understand what does this mean for their lives and livelihoods. So that when you can't get water in Kayon, that you understand is because to a significant extent is climate change. When the farmers are complaining that their crops are not growing as they should, it is because there are changes in precipitation patterns that are affecting how they farm. When they say also that they're seeing emergence of new diseases, that they understand that climate change is also resulting in their production being affected. When you have persons who are saying you go to the beach and the beach does not look how it used to look and not as attractive as it used to be, because now you have sargassum on the beach, that you understand that this is because of climate change as well. So two things I think we need to really push forward for in 2024. One, once we are on one hand, while we are seeking to get the necessary financing for the transformation. Two, that this is being done in concert with our people and that they're understanding clearly what the government is seeking to achieve, and they understand as well what climate change means to them and how they can play a critical part. So whatever you do in St. Kitts and Nevis, we want our people to be a part of it and to let them know that they can be a part of it. For example, and I wrap up by saying, you might be a sanitary worker, but your work is critical as well to keep the environment clean. That is your contribution. You might be a youth into music and the orange economy. You can use your music to spread the message, for one. You can use your music and entertainment to create jobs and help to bring in some of the money that is needed for this transformation. What I'm simply saying, whatever you do in St. Kitts and Nevis, we have to link your activity to what we are seeking to achieve. And that, I think, is still a challenge. It is not insurmountable, as mentioned, and that will be part of our thrust in 2024 to bring the message closer home and to get more buy-in from our people and to allow them the opportunity to recognize how serious this matter is and where they fit in. So those are the two critical challenges that I recognize at this time, of course, among others.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. At least we know, it is very good to know that we know what our challenges are, we can define them clearly, and we know how we are going to step forward to resolve them. So my next question is to Minister Clark. Given what the Prime Minister has said, what policies or initiatives have we pulled together or are being developed so that it can provide an enabling environment for the realization of a sustainable island state?
Thank you, P.S. Rattan, and of course, thank you, Prime Minister, for outlining what our challenges are. And as you asked, the policy framework and legislative framework.
Yes.
I think they're inviting her to the front.
Just for 2 seconds. Right. So the policy framework and the legislative framework around the sustainable island state will be critical to ensure our vision becomes reality, and it's Vision 2040. The vision and the timeline are also in line with the National Development Plan as outlined by our Minister of Investment, as well as other critical plans, including the National Physical Development Plan, the Urban Resilience Plan, and of course, developing our National Adaptation Plan. All of these policy frameworks are in sync with our Sustainable Island State Agenda. It's a 7-pillar framework which speaks to energy security, food security, water security, sustainable industry, sustainable settlements, the circular economy, and of course, social protection and health. And I want to just spend one moment to speak in particular about climate and health, of which our Prime Minister, a former medical doctor,
Former?
will be championing for our region. We recognize also that the key legislative framework, again outlined in the grounding statement by our foreign minister, the legislative framework which supports the transition to a sustainable island state has to speak to climate resilience, has to speak to how we continue the National Development Plan for St. Kitts and Nevis. And the biggest legislative amendment that we're going to do in partnership with our partners here, secretly, the University of the West Indies, and I'm naming them because they can never leave us until we get there, will also be our NCMA, which we can speak about a little bit later. But without policy and without legislation, we can speak about sustainable island state forever and it never happens. Because vision needs to be grounded in policy, and policy then leads to the appropriate action. So, and as we started, action inspires us. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Clark. Thank you. I'm happy she outlined the pillars, the 7 pillars, and if you cast your mind back to the Prime Minister's opening statement, he started with energy. So I'm now going to invite Minister Maynard. You can come to the front, Minister Maynard, like Minister Clark, to let's flesh out and uncover why energy is so important. I'll have you know he's also an engineer, so we expect him to, bring it down to brass tacks and give us that understanding of why this energy is so important why this energy is so important. And let me just add in something, because he's also the Minister of Technology. What role does digital and technology have to play in this?
All right, thank you very much, Madam Ratan. Foreign Minister was trying to say that I was an engineer. I am still an engineer. Right, I spent many years for that to just go like that. Right?
I spent 11.
But energy is really what we believe is the crux of the matter. If we look at our lives, think for a moment about the way we live, and think about where all of it starts, or what is needed to keep it going. Whatever you do, and inevitably you will come back to energy. Perhaps I like to start with water. Climate change has affected us in a very negative way when it comes to our rainfall. Prior to now, St. Kitts and Nevis depended on rainfall, 100% rainfall, to get its water source. That is 30% runoff, surface water, and another 70% from well water. But over the past 10 years alone, there's been roughly a 20% decrease in rainfall. In just the last year alone, there's been a 40% decrease over last year. That coincides with the growth of our country economically. More hotels, more people having homes, more flush toilets, for instance. And so as our water resource has decreased, our demand has increased. But we do not have much other sources, for instance, in the Bastia Basin. We have our treasured Bastia Valley Aquifer, but that is on the brink of collapse because we are extracting too much. So then what is our solution? Our solution is we have a body of water around us that is completely renewable. We could never use enough of that water. But how do we get that to be potable? The only way is through desalination. And what does desalination need? Energy. And so the reality is our lives center around what the cost or availability of energy is. Another example is the electricity that we use, of course, in our homes. Right now, our government is subsidizing energy, rather subsidizing the cost or the variation of cost of fuel, such that that is not passed on to our consumers. That requires the government to spend huge amounts of capital, which it could otherwise provide to social programs, for instance, or other developments in health or other factors. So energy, again, is the cost of tremendous expense for the government. So therefore, to solve something like water, what do we need? Energy. So as I've said many times before, if you solve energy, then you solve water. Because our rainfall is down, our farming community has traditionally depended on rainfall for their crops. But with decreased rainfall, they can't do that anymore. So they need to call upon the water system. So again, if you solve energy, you solve water. And if you solve water, you solve food. And that is the important nexus that energy plays. One other thing I would add in this section is St. Kitts and Nevis provides a large safety net for our citizens. We have a tremendous amount of social programs that ensure that we keep persons out of poverty. But what energy provides for us is much like what I think of when I reflect as a little boy growing up and going to school and reading that Jamaica has bauxite and other resources, Guyana has gold and lumber, Trinidad has oil, had oil and gas. You had Barbados, who started off early in tourism. And I used to ask myself, well, what do we have? I mean, we had sugar that at the time was already a dying industry. But St. Kitts and Nevis effectively has found its gold, its bauxite, its oil and gas through renewable energy. So we have a resource that we can now call our own that we can exploit. And when we exploit that, not only will it solve water and solve food, but it opens up opportunities for us to create significant levels of employment, thereby negating the need for the government to expend itself as it does in the tremendous amount of social programs. Because now we can upskill our people. I see Dr. Archibald here, who is going to be leading a renewable energy course at our college, one of the largest in the region, if not the largest, that is open to not only St. Kittians and Nevisians, but also the wider region. If we can upskill our people to utilize the tremendous resource that we have in energy as a sector, as something that we can sell, as something that we can market, then you see that it also solves our social challenges that we would have. So energy for me is really the crux of the matter. And it would put St. Kitts and Nevis on a path that makes it truly independent, bring a level of energy security, which I translate to sovereign security, such that we don't have to suffer from the shocks that exist beyond our control outside the bounds and boundaries of St. Kitts and Nevis. How does technology play a part in that? Well, everything has to be smart, right? This is the smart age. And we are now transitioning into a digital economy where we're pursuing our digital transformation agenda. Now, for you to have digital transformation agenda, you have to be able to hold large amounts of data and manage the data. That requires data centers, which use tremendous amount of energy. We also need to have reliability, such that if our systems are now completely online, they must always be powered. And so technology is going to play a crucial role in terms of our overall transition, and energy is directly connected to that. If we want to think of things like attracting cryptocurrency mining, for instance, we have to have the energy, and that is a link also to technology. Also, finally, we are going to need technology to manage all of these things together. I had the privilege of visiting a particular site in Jamaica where they have a center that manages all of the renewable energy sources that they have. And before time, you would have to do a lot of manual work, manual switching, but technology allows you to sit in a center and be able to manage all of these systems efficiently and effectively from one spot. So it is all connected with energy as the crux of the matter.
Thank you very much, Minister Mina. So there you have it. Our Minister of Energy has made connections across technology, made connections in our daily lives. So we have some simplification of how this sustainable island state will affect our behaviors for the future. And to bring down the curtain, our last question goes to our Minister of Foreign Affairs. Given, Minister Douglas, that you have, given the black thing, that you have the responsibility. Okay. Yes. He gonna roll up. Yes. Are you all set? That has to be pinned onto him. Yes. Yes. Given that you have been pursuing foreign affairs policy, you also have the responsibility for economic development and investment. And given, I recall your excitement last year in Egypt for your COP at that level, where it struck you, foreign affairs has a greater role to play. The question for you is, what has been your pitch? What has been your pitch to help to shape this visionary transformation?
Right. I think we have emphasized all day, and we'll continue to emphasize it in the days to come, that there's going to be the need for partnership, effective, continuing, consolidating partnership. And if we are going to partner with the rest of the world, we need, therefore, to ensure that there is proper connection and communication with the rest of the world. Foreign affairs is obviously a very important entity or agency of the government that connects St. Kitts and Nevis, irrespective of the ministerial section. It connects with the rest of the world, not only country to country, but ministry to ministry, because communications will come through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in getting to different parts of the government, ministries of the government, departments of the government, and even to a large extent dealing with private sector investors. So foreign affairs, which therefore is critical, need to be properly structured. Structured in the sense that we must have the obvious divisions within the ministry that deals with different aspects of its work. There's bilateral relationship. And here, for example, we've been speaking about our bilateral relationship with Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia didn't just walk into St. Kitts and sit down, or our Prime Minister didn't just go to Saudi Arabia and sit down in a hotel and just sign. It is because of the bilateral relationship that had been established. Several visits to Saudi Arabia and several visits from Saudi Arabia to St. Kitts. So the bilateral relationship is critical. And that means lending the necessary support to Saudi Arabia in its own international foreign affairs policies. There's also multilateral relationship. We speak of SACRI. We speak of CARICOM. We speak of the EU. We speak of the GCC countries. All these are different important countries and entities coming together collectively that we have to communicate with from within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So there's a desk in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that deals particularly with multilateral relationship. And there we communicate, not country to country, but with institutions, groupings of countries, so that we can outline to them what our needs are and ensure that their responses are targeted to our needs. So foreign affairs is critically important. It means, therefore, you have to train your staff. They have to be part and parcel of the necessary teams that go. Some people say, oh, people in foreign affairs are always traveling and so forth and that and that. How the heck are you going to learn and make contact unless you travel? So these are critical partnerships that have to be established and pursued and consolidated. And some of these partnerships require legislative support. You heard what the Prime Minister said. We have a bilateral relationship with the United States of America, with Saudi Arabia. There's geothermal in Nevis. It is situated on the island of Nevis. Nevis is part of the Federation. But they want to make sure that if they are going to develop geothermal, it's the country. And so the federal parliament sat, passed the necessary supportive piece of legislation or resolution, and then it goes into the sister island in the local assembly of Nevis, so that the international community and our partners are realizing, boy, this is something that is truly federal and national as a resource in the development of this country. And bam, they lend their support. I'll stop here.
Thank you very much. The takeaway is, we really have to become uncomfortable sometimes so that we can grow. Because all of the speakers outlined steps that have to be made that are not our normal steps that we take every day. So let us keep that in mind. And with that in mind, I'm going to invite any questions from our audience. We have some faces here that have interests. What, any of the points made, is there any clarification? Is there any curiosity that you have that you would like to pose a question to the panel? Yes, we have a young man over here. Is he mic'd? Pass on the mic that's over there, Minister Clark. So identify yourself. They will need to mic you. It's streaming. Yes.
Okay, well, I'm Neil Gomes. I'm from Anguilla. I'm one of the international youth climate delegates. I didn't want to come to the front, but
Yes.
I'm
We're very
Neil.
happy to have you to the front.
Thank you. I'm Neil Gomes. I'm from Anguilla. Half Kittitian. My father's from Center Point, so I'm Center Pointian, not Kittitian. But there's a lot of hope in St. Kitts, there's a lot of opportunities and so on. So I was wondering, what are the possibilities of reuniting the St. Kitts Nevis Anguilla connection and actually partner for sustainable development in Anguilla? As you know, we are overseas territories, so it's very hard creating partnerships with CARICOM and those other Caribbean states. But with our history and our close proximity, there's a lot of possibilities. What are the possibilities you see for the development in Anguilla? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Neil. Is there another question so that we can take 2 questions? Okay, let us invite Mr. Philip.
Specific question for the panelists, please keep that in your mind. We'll come to you.
My name is Ryan Phillip. I am also an international youth climate delegate, and I work at the St. Kitts Water Services Department as an assistant water engineer. First of all, I would like to thank the Honorable Prime Minister for championing the Sustainable Island State agenda, and the other ministers as well for doing so. You mentioned in your brief introduction that there will be job creation. You know, this transition will create over 1,000 jobs. You also mentioned that you're looking, or there will be the implementation of a certification program within the country. I'm assuming that that will be vocational training, specifically in the realm of solar, I guess, energy systems. I anticipate that there will be a broader skills gap, and I wanted to know if any assessment has been done of that skills gap, and also what other educational opportunities will be created to ensure that once we transition to a sustainable island state, that locals would be the first persons to be able to take up these opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Philip. I would ask, who should I direct the first question to?
I think he asked me the question.
You have one more? So we will answer first because we're running a bit on time. And Prime Minister, which one would you like to tackle?
Right.
Don't forget this.
Good. He asked about the Anguilla question. I chose to take this one because it is not a simple and straightforward answer as might seem. I would like to say I've met with your Premier, and we understand the history of St. Kitts and Nevis and Anguilla. And I like the openness of the Premier to re-engage. As a matter of fact, this year I went to Anguilla for an event, and I am told that I was the first Prime Minister to have been at that event in so many years, understanding what really took place between St. Kitts Nevis and Anguilla. Same issue when we had to pass the resolution in Parliament with respect to treating geothermal as a national asset, because we understand politically, historically, that it was only seen as a Nevis Island asset, and that had resulted in the stalling of the development. I'm being totally open and frank because I think we are at the point where our people are requiring these open and frank discussion. So we were able to get over the hurdle of the Nevis matter. With respect to the Anguilla matter, when I traveled there, I was mindful of the history and the political history. However, interestingly enough, I think as the Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, I was well received, and that started to open up pathways that had been closed for many years, and we know that. In speaking with the Premier, who is there now, who is also a medical doctor, my colleague, we started to have meaningful discussion on how St. Kitts and Nevis and Anguilla can partner together once again in dealing with our common issues. Again, it seems like something small, but it's very significant if we understand the history and also understand the history of the party from whence I come. That is to be honest and to put everything on the table. And so he's open. And so we have started to discuss a number of critical matters through the OECS, because he was in St. Kitts for the OECS, where I'm the chair for OECS now, and also through CARICOM, not as much, but definitely through the OECS. And so we are looking at the issues of climate change and how we can partner, one, on the issue of sargassum and beach erosion. How can we partner on that? Two, I'm saying to Anguilla that we can develop our geothermal on Nevis. How can they benefit from that through underground cables and so forth? Because if we are able to develop a gigawatt, that means the other countries around can definitely benefit as well. Three, with our courses that we are going to offer, we would like to invite our brothers and sisters from Anguilla to come into St. Kitts to become certified in these courses as well, because I know that Anguilla will be charting a course of renewable energy, of which solar energy will also be part of the mix. So I would like to say that we have started the discussion. We are open, we are frank, we are willing in this new age to take those steps that would see St. Kitts and Nevis and Anguilla, all three of us working together to achieve what we think would be a secured livelihood and secured lives for all of our people. So yes, we have started along that path with meaningful discussions. And I'll pass it on. You talk about the jobs. I would allow the Minister of Economic Development and Investments to speak to that at this time as well.
Just a housekeeping note, after Minister Douglas addresses that issue, both you and Prime Minister will be excused for another event, and we will I'll have Mr. Campbell, Professor Campbell, summarize in your presence the guidance he has, and then we'll allow the other ministers to continue the discussion with them. Yes.
Right. I think we most likely will understand that in moving forward with this new agenda, there would have to be a number of jobs not only created, but a number of jobs that are to be sustained. Of course, training is going to be required to a large extent. If we are going to perform new tasks with new responsibilities in a new era, because of what we're pursuing, which is new, we will have to have people properly trained in those areas. That is why at the moment we are trying our very best to reach out to countries that are friendly to us. As I speak, I believe that there is a team home in St. Kitts and Nevis that's looking, for example, at establishment of e-government. How are we going to introduce e-government as part of the digital divide that we're trying to ensure is made by having an assessment of where we are as a country and how we can scale up, not only in government, but also in communicating with the rest of the world and in communicating with citizens there in St. Kitts and Nevis. So job creation definitely will be in almost every area that we speak of. New jobs, trainable jobs. The outreach will be in new exciting areas. I mean, Congress is an engineer, and so we'll probably have very many more water engineers as a result of what we're seeking to do. We need electrical engineers. I'm sure that there would be many jobs created, but you also need economists. Don't forget that. You need economists. You need economists that are looking at how the country is going to move forward with its investment agenda, but being very conscious that it must be sustainable, that it must be environmentally conscious. And so job creation in terms of in terms of food security with the development of the agricultural sector. I mentioned earlier, legislation will have to be put in place to ensure that the fishing industry is secured, not only for now, for 10 years, but for the years to come. Prime Minister spoke about the need to ensure that our coral reefs and our coastal areas are protected. All this will bring new job opportunities for our people in St. Kitts and Nevis. Trained, experienced people.
Douglas, could you pass to our guests? He's going to come over here. Where's the other one?
All right.
You have that? We will indulge you before you leave so that he can bring a summary to what has been discussed. You'll have that benefit.
Any studies that speak about sarcasm?
Take it up some more. The mic. No, this one in your hand. The one in your hand.
Right?
Yes, go ahead. Take it up.
All right, good morning, everyone. And off the bat, I would like to first thank the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis for the opportunity to share some thoughts on this impressive Sustainable Island State initiative. And the fact that I'm here is testament to the government's commitment to meaningful partnerships. And you would have heard that several times mentioned. And the first thing I would like to say that when it comes to political will, ambition, imagination, and creativity, the Sustainable Island State initiative is in a class by itself. We know that business as usual won't get us the changes we need, the transformation that is required to deal with some of the challenges we currently face. And after listening to the presentations, I believe that it is a stroke of genius for three reasons. The first is the pace of the impacts of climate change that we're experiencing. And you would have heard examples of some of the impacts on water, food, and energy systems. The second is related to the scale of the solutions that are needed. And third, the finance, how we cut the umbilical cord of dependence on just international public finance. Now, in terms of urgency or meeting the moment, we see that the societal challenges are compounding much faster than the solutions we have available. And that there is increasing concern that the solution space is narrowing. That is, the range of options available for adaptation is shrinking. And you would have heard Dr. Gardner mention the big climate challenge facing the world. And the current pace of this progress is insufficient to keep up with the compounding impacts we're experiencing. And one of the strongest messages coming out of this COP, and that you would have heard the PM himself mention several times, is that vulnerable countries should not have to choose between climate action and other development priorities. And across the Caribbean, what we're seeing is that adaptation planning and implementation is fragmented. This whole of government approach to the Sustainable Island State Agenda is a clear indication of the government's recognition of this artificial divide between climate action and sustainable development. And the second point that came out strongly is the matter of scale. And it's related to the last question about neighboring islands. It is clear that the vision for a sustainable island state is not just for St. Kitts, but it will benefit other countries as well. It is good news for neighboring countries. And so what we know for sure is that piecemeal approaches and quick fixes, they jeopardize long-term success. And the holistic approach proposed for the Sustainable Island State Agenda provides a unique opportunity to scale projects and programs and remove sectoral silos. The energy security target that is mentioned is not just about energy. It is about health, it is about food, it is about water. It is about all sectors of the economy. And these synergies are important to take advantage of opportunities at scale and remove barriers to the implementation of climate initiatives. And at a time when adaptation should be accelerating, we're seeing that, at least from the latest adaptation gap report, that it has slowed down across finance, planning, and implementation. And the final point is related to finance. And the foreign minister mentioned the creative blend of options that the government is looking at in terms of investment. Now, finance, trade, and technology are the means of implementation. And it is clear that the Sustainable Island State Agenda is the country's pathway to the new climate economy. We know that there are major adaptation implementation gaps, and the structure of this Sustainable Island State Agenda is such that the country is taking matters into its own hands. It is unrealistic to expect that public money will materialize at the pace and in the amounts to match the problem we currently face. In fact, the flow of international public adaptation finance to developing countries have declined since 2020. It takes cash to care. It will also take care to truly deliver climate justice. And when I heard the Prime Minister speak about the importance of people understanding what this whole agenda is about and the passion with which he spoke about including people, it gives hope that we can redress some of the long-standing structural inequalities that prevent us or that constrain adaptation progress, not just in St. Kitts and Nevis, but across the region. But in spite of these challenges that may lie ahead, we are encouraged by the fervent commitment to multilateralism, to astute diplomacy, and you would have heard about some of these bilateral relationships and what they have led to. The robust partnerships Devon and I were here to support. The government is leading on behalf of the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. And in my own capacity at the University of the West Indies, I would like to reassure you of my own commitment to support in whatever ways that I can. Thank you.
Be careful. Thank you very much. At this point, I'm going to thank Prime Minister and Foreign Minister for joining us, but they have to leave right now. Ms. Connor will escort you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you so much. I appreciate all the hard work.
Thank you very much.
Good.
Yes.
Jasmine?
Professor, yeah, Dr. Clark told me about you. I said, yes, thank you so much.
Yeah, man, happy to be here.
Good, good. See you all right?
Finally, good to meet you. Yeah, man.
Okay. Okay, now Ministers Clark and Maynard can fill the space in the event that for us to conclude, or have we concluded? Are there any more questions? Nevlek and Skelek is here. Any questions, concerns? CDB is here too. Oh, Mr. Joseph Liver just entered the doors. So, if we don't have any more questions, we will now close. Any more observations? I do trust, sit down, let me thank now. I do trust the presentations have really clarified for you, given you a deeper appreciation for the journey in St. Kitts and Nevis to a sustainable island state. Of course, with all of the issues, Dr. Campbell, I think you beautifully captured where we have to go. So we are very happy to have the University of West Indies on board and SICRI on board in the person of Dr. Devon Gardner. So I'm happy that you feel our passion. I am happy that you recognize that we recognize what the issues are and that we are passionately willing to work. So thank you very much for joining us, and thank you very much for being here with us. Okay? You may